So we have this morning our AngelCon 2024 investor panel. David Benham, Donica Francich, and Nicholas Johnson. And I'm going to let you each introduce yourselves and talk a little bit about your backgrounds, and then we'll dig in. And then I have my questions. We'll dig into some questions. But yeah, David, tell us a bit about your background.
Thank you, yes. And I'd like to put in a plug for Cal Poly. I am a alumni from decades and decades ago, albeit, and recently returned to San Luis Obispo from the Bay Area. I am about 3 or 4 years into my journey as an angel investor, and in addition to doing angel investing as part of the AngelCon, also do some angel investing as part of a club, if you will, an angel group called the Element 8 Angels. So some of what I might talk about is also influenced by that time there. Otherwise, did typical high-tech jobs in Silicon Valley for decades.
Oh, well, hang on. Typical.
No, with product and technology. Sorry.
Yeah. But no, yeah. Okay, we'll dig into that. Donica.
Good morning. I'm Donica Francich. I'm a corporate attorney focusing on working mostly with early stage startups. And I've been helping out here with the SBDC and the CIA programs for about 8-9 years now. And I also have been a part of AngelCon from the beginning, doing trainings for the investors in startups. And then I joined as an investor in Fund 3, and I've continued throughout each cycle of the fund since. I'm Fund 4 manager as well. And I'm a Bay Area native, grew up in San Jose, but I am now a SLO County local. I moved to Paso Robles about 2.5 years ago, and I love it here. So I'm glad to be a part of the local community.
Great to have you. Nick, good morning.
Good morning. Yeah, Nick Johnson. I used to be a portfolio manager. I worked in finance at an asset management company called PIMCO for about 20 years. I left, when I was there, I ran a commodity desk, managed a hedge fund, things like that. I left a couple years ago, and now I do a small smattering of things. I'm take care of 3 kids. I try to be a good husband. I created a small startup of my own that I work in the real estate space to try to help people get better results from the real estate agent and get better fees, and try to figure out what it is that I would like to do. And part of that is it's fun to do angel investing, get exposed to some new ideas and meet some new interesting people, some of which are up here. And so that's kind of my background in a nutshell. And I guess I also moved up here recently. We live up in Harmony, near Cambria, about a year ago. So yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I mean, we have 3 kids. I mean, we're 5, so there's probably time. Yeah.
1/3 of the.
Yeah.
Oh, that's great. That's really great. Well, thank you all for being here this morning. So on that note, you started off on that topic a little bit, Nick. What is it that draws you? This is a big picture to startup investing. So what's the draw for each of you? So you started referring to that a little bit, Nick.
Yeah, I think it's interesting to be exposed to people who are looking to change the way things are done, people who are interested in some kind of innovation, see some possibility to do something differently. So there's a broad culture, and you can find it inside of big organizations. I think I met, my wife and I were up here in San Luis Obispo a few years ago when I worked at PIMCO, and I think we were meeting with someone on the SBDC about various things, and they talked about this idea of an entrepreneur, and you could innovate within a bigger organization. And so I think that's true. You can have kind of innovation everywhere, but it's kind of necessary in a startup. And so it's easier to find it in that community. And so I think that's one of the things that I've always found, kind of inspiring and fun to see. And so that's, that's mine.
Your motivation. Yeah, Donica, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, for me, since I work with startups every day, I like to see how I can help participate in the success of some of my clients. And for me, the AngelCon program, I just love the community aspect of it, how it brings local and, or Cal Poly related, investors together with, the startup community here that you built, and helps them just not only from an investment standpoint, but from a mentorship, networking, growth perspective. I like that aspect of it. I've gotten to know so many people through the AngelCon experience, and been able to work with, more community folks and that way.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
love the program that
The
um,
network
the
side of
network
it, yeah.
setting and meeting new folks. And it's fun, like David and I met last year when he joined AngelCon, and we're working together on something now, and it's fun to see that. And it's nice to see my clients every year that participate in the competition. And you know, it's nice to see when we have some of them win, and you know, others participate. So
Yeah,
it's great.
yeah. And David, you were already involved with Elements 8 prior to joining AngelCon, so you're already in that world. So what drew you to Element 8 to start, and then?
Okay, one, by and large, or largely to make a difference. Yeah, yes, I want to make a return so that for me, it's sort of like an evergreen fund, budget I've set aside. I want that to be successful and continue growing and continue hopefully making a difference. And the Element Angels is a clean tech or climate tech focused angel group. So for me, it was trying to make some difference there. The other thing that maybe wasn't a calculus going into the decision, but one which I've observed since, though, that keeps me engaged for sure, is being around all the other smart people that are in that group, in this group, but also being around the entrepreneurs who are taking shots on goal, which is quite inspiring versus all the bad news that's out there.
Right, right, because they're changing. Yeah, yeah. No, that's a good point. So on that note, so you mentioned Element 8 is focused on clean tech, environmental, mission-driven type of startups. What about you, Donica and Nick? Are you attracted to any specific industry? Is there something that really appeals to you, big picture, before actually talking about, how we select the startups that we select and how we make our investment decisions, but just from an industry perspective or a social mission perspective? Is there anything that draws you in more?
I definitely think impact investing draws me in, whether it's clean tech or, something that's socially relevant, right? Justice or whatnot, because I think a lot of us that have, grown up in California, we definitely have a mindset of, to be socially relevant in what we're doing. But I also feel like, for me personally, as a woman that's grown up in a somewhat still male-dominated field, I definitely like to uplift other females and female founders too. I find because still the data shows that investment in female-led startups is, what, 2%?
It's worldwide. It says 2% of all venture funding. Yeah.
Versus, and the returns actually show a higher return, but we're still such a disparity there. So that's sort of my focus.
Wow, that's amazing. When I feel like sometimes I'll talk with my wife and she throws out a statistic that I'm unaware of, or like you mentioned the 2%, and you hear it and you're like, wow. Like it's really shocking. I mean, it's just like, it's like, if you would have asked me for a number, I wouldn't have looked at.
Even I go into board meetings today and I'm still the only woman in the room on the call. And I've, been doing this 25 years and it hasn't changed all that much, unfortunately. I have a lot of work to do, so. Not to bring down.
No, and it's something, I mean, it's interesting, something I, during AngelCon, I don't know, for those of you who weren't there at the actual event, I was sort of digging into our data to see what's happened over the last 7 years since we've been doing AngelCon. And of the 9 most highly performing companies that have, that we've that we've been tracking, the 9 most successful of the, 6 times 7, 42. Yeah. Of the 42 companies, there's a top 9 and that are doing extremely well, off the charts great. And so we'll probably see some successes there very soon. 66% of those were women-led. 2/3 were women-led. So to your point, we invest little in them, but the ROI seems to be there long-term. So that was encouraging. Another little piece of data for you, Nick.
Another happy, another, as you made me reflect on my own, I realized out of the startup investing I've done, half of them have been, so I guess, it's a very small sample size in my case, but out of like, the 8, 4 of them were, so it's like a slightly more positive note. And of those, one of them was through what's the birth device is, to help.
Lydia Health. Yeah.
By far the like, kind of probably best IRR of anything that I've done. So,
Yeah. And
Yeah.
then now
Yeah.
Amy's doing Nova.
Yeah, and so actually,
Yeah.
and then I guess the runner-up this year, we could call and Ment's was a women founder. So 2%, but some positive data points.
Yeah. That's right.
I think it's good. We're going in the right direction.
And so speaking of, so Nick, you mentioned, and well, all of you had made some startup investments prior to AngelCon. Has participating in AngelCon, what has that brought to the table in as far as your perspective on your investment decisions? So has there been some evolution there? Were you investing just, whatever, referrals, friends, whatnot, and now do you think there's do you have a different approach to your investment strategy in startups after participating in the program?
We'll start. I guess I would view it as part of like in some ways, anytime you take on additional educational material, it's very hard to like, for your approach to ever be static. So I feel like I've learned a lot of things through AngelCon. They obviously bring in great outside speakers, experts in their particular area to educate people. And so during that process, you can't help but be informed. I feel like it's kind of been an ongoing evolution. I don't feel like there's been a
what are
big
the
change.
areas that what are some of the takeaways do you think that you think, okay, I need to focus on this more, or this is something I hadn't dwelled on as much, or maybe things that came up during due diligence that when you were trying to apply?
I think probably the biggest one has been seeing the benefit. So David's part of a group. Before I'd always done it very individually, and I think the biggest takeaway I've seen probably is just go in the approach of going through due diligence with a group of people. How much more effective that can be, because I can think of thoughtful questions I can ask you about your startup, but to have multiple people, bring their own perspective during due diligence and understand an idea, I think really unearths a lot of additional perspectives and so I think it would probably, that idea of a process, instead of thinking of it as like an individual, thinking about more as a group. And that has filtered out, I guess, the things I've done elsewhere. I've been more inclined probably to share with other people and then to kind of create a small like consortium of people who do something, as opposed to in the past, I think if I went 5 years ago, I would just, be like, oh yes, I think this is good, I'll do this individually. And now, get a small group of people together and invest and do that as a group, which I think is kind of enhanced the process. It's probably a result of kind of seeing how things play out in AngelCon.
Oh, that's great. That's
Yeah,
great.
I would echo that. I think that bringing together different perspectives, and everybody has different career paths that lead to their specialty, and sort of, Nick can look at things from a financial perspective, maybe, and David from a specific technical perspective, and I from a legal perspective, and we can bring our collective breadth of experience together and really deep dive into the startup that we're on a due diligence team for. And then we go to the group and openly discuss all the startups and I think that really leads to a great understanding of everyone's, you know, perspective of the different teams and what they have to offer as far as from an investment return. And that's what I think is the best thing about AngelCon is learning from others and getting that experience and different perspectives.
Yeah, very
David-
similar
yeah.
points. I would point out that in angel groups, and certainly Element Angels, the due diligence is a all volunteer process,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And pretty quickly, sometimes too quickly, a few people will go, oh, I'm not so interested after all in investing, and then drop off.
Yeah.
And then it falls on only a couple of three people. And therefore the team gets, the team sport here gets sometimes a little too narrow with people already interested. So I think sometimes a lack of diversity and input in that process can happen in the all volunteer case. I suppose, I do not know for certain, that at least in the case of AngelCon, even if you weren't necessarily convinced yourself, you still wanted to be there to put your thumb on the scale of
Right.
how the decisions
Right.
got made, since we were making diligence for ultimately the entire pool,
Right.
as opposed to only your individual check. And then the final thing, and I'm not just saying this because Donica's sitting next to me, but the teams in Element 8 don't have any legal representation. And I think that definitely helped us both last year and this year.
That's good
So,
to.
certain aspects of.
So I want to talk a bit more about due diligence, because this year, just like last year, I think that some interesting things came up during diligence. So we all thought we were going one way, and then did a bit of a sharp right turn. And so we'll talk about that. But let's talk about how, what were the drivers when you selected your top 12? And then we narrowed it down to our top 6. So at top 12, I think the criteria is a little wider. It's a more open aperture on what we're evaluating, and then it gets more precise. Can you talk about that process, about how you came about the initial selection and then the next round of selection? What were go ahead.
Went from the 12 to 6, which is,
And even the
still
top
kind
12,
of-
like what was at
yeah,
first,
yeah.
how were you
Yeah.
doing your selection, going through your selection process?
I use a criteria very similar to how we do screening in the Element Angels, primarily 4 things. Is this a painkiller versus vitamin?
Oh, that's great.
I'll come back to that. Is the team interesting? Like at the top of Maslow's hierarchy of team would be an entrepreneur that's already been there, done an exit even, that'd be like the best. But traction, and that can come in many different forms, right? Again, the ultimate would be having revenue already from customers, and interesting exits. And by that, I mean, not down to I know exactly who's going to buy them. That's nice when that happens, but usually is this a flourishing scenario where there needs to be some consolidation if it's going to be M&A, or interesting comparables if it's a public market kind of situation. Those are the top 4 things. And then I'll just comment on the painkiller versus vitamins. So to be fair to vitamins, I believe the market for vitamins is about 2/3 of that of painkillers. But going with that analogy, when discretionary funds start to get tight, which one are you likely going to drop, right? If you need the Tylenol, you're just not going to give that up, right? So the desire is, if you, again, everything else being equal, would be to pick the painkiller scenario, because that's going to probably allow for a few more mistakes to take place, which are just inevitable, and still come out favorably. So that's some of the things I look for during that first pass.
Yeah. So someone's providing a real solution to a real problem. Yeah.
I think the top 12, picking the top 12 is the hardest part of
Yeah.
AngelCon, because you only have the information they submitted.
Right.
Which is very
Right.
little.
Right. Yeah.
And so you have, they haven't pitched, you might have a video, you have some things they wrote up, maybe quasi financial statements, if that. So for me, I look for, it's more of a gut check. Did they put in effort? Cause you can tell if somebody put an effort in the application, or they just kind of, I'll just try this and
Oh.
maybe, you know, I get it or not. And to me, is it something I'm interested in, right? Cause all the things, David's very thoughtful, cause I was on the due diligence team with him. All those things I think come out during the top 12 to top 6, right? But I think for me, it's getting at the first stage is it something that's interesting to me that fills a niche, which I think is what we're looking for anyway, right?
Yeah.
And so I think that's the hardest part.
But I mean, that's a good point. We don't really dwell on that too much, but the quality of your
Yeah, the
application,
quality
like,
is
was there diligence put into
Yeah.
that, you know? Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah, no, I would just echo that. I mean, I feel like there's a big difference between, it becomes very obvious if people fill out the application and it felt like they really wanted it versus, did they think about it as, putting their best foot forward? Did they like really put together something that was gonna like, catch your interest, make you want to learn more? I mean, I feel like, the things like, are you interested in this? Is it going to have an impact? Like, I mean, there's the obvious things. Could you see this working? But really, I feel like when you look at it, there's
The quality.
there's just a,
Yeah.
it's very clear. Some of them you're just like,
Did you plan out what you were gonna write your essay on for your college exam, or did you write it the last night, right? Before it was due, kind of mentality.
did write
Right.
my admission essay to Cal
Well, of
Poly
course.
literally the night before.
But, and
Sometimes it works out.
sometimes it does work out, but, and then also like, did it grab you in that first like couple sentences, right?
Yeah,
Because
yeah.
sometimes if you're reading and you don't really know what's happening, like what they're doing until the third paragraph, it's like, you got
But, and,
it.
right, and you're
So-
not going through you're going through a number of
Yeah.
applications. So the ones that if you can't understand after two, you're just gonna zap.
Yeah, it's
Like,
like,
it's okay,
what
next one.
happened?
Yeah.
And sometimes you're going, well, do I have to pick 12? Because
Yeah.
you didn't get that instant, oh, this is cool
Yeah.
feeling
Yeah,
when you're picking, but
yeah.
ultimately you have to go back and reread a few and get there.
No, that's, and then it's okay. So then from the top 12 to the top 6, that's when, so just to let everyone know, we see the top 12 pitch live. So they get to come in and then you actually get to meet the founders, and it's a different setup. So how, David, you mentioned the top 4 criteria, which I imagine is what you're looking for when they're actually pitching. Anything else that bubbles up when you see the pitch?
Yeah, obviously there's, when you, particularly in AngelCon and largely true even of the 8 Angels, we're at pre-seed and seed. So you really are still mostly investing in people, right? Because so much is yet to be determined or could happen, right? So getting a feel for the entrepreneur or co-founders, if multiple, presenting is a big part of that. Beyond the 4 things I mentioned, probably.
And okay, let's stop on that for 1 second.
uh-huh.
So the founders,
Yeah.
you're betting on the team. So within that, what is it that you're looking for in these founders? I mean, right?
Well, both their experience, their inspiration that comes out during the delivery as well as the content. And then the advisory team, because there's, without, again, at the level we're at here, 2 or 3 people, going to need some complementary advisory team that's helping them. So that would be the analytical answer to your
Yeah,
question.
yeah.
Yeah,
And
can
it-
they communicate their idea, what their team is doing, in a concise manner? And do they, have some sort of, charisma to want to bring you into their team and into the fold and invest in them, right? Because as David said, in this stage, a lot of times, teams are going to pivot. And so you're really, a lot of the bet is on the founders, not just the product or service that they're building.
Mhm.
Yeah, and I guess I feel like when they're pitching, I guess what I'm thinking is like, did they convince me there's a problem? They're working on something, but they need to convey to me that this is a real problem they're trying to solve, and do they have a credible solution? You know, enough that you'd want to learn more, because the pitch is pretty short.
10
It's-
minutes, yep.
Yeah, it's 10 minutes, so they need to, you know, kind of give you some sense of inspiration and some belief that they are credible enough that you would be curious to, you know, spend another half an hour, you know, to understand this more. And I think where people fall down is some people don't kind of fully convey the problem, or they don't come across as credible during that time. And then sometimes wrongly, you know, I think I might write them off, but you're forced to make this decision with the information you have. And so if you don't come across as credible, then, you know, it just kind of ends.
So, and then, so now you pick your top 6. We start the due diligence process. What are the things that came up during due diligence that swayed you one way or the other, that swayed you positively versus negatively, like things that came up? Because we take due diligence very seriously, right? So everyone knows, you know, Theranos story, like, let's throw billions of dollars at this company who doesn't have a product. So let's dig into that, because we do spend 4 to 6 weeks, you know, with these founders. It's pretty intense. Do you want to talk a little bit about how you went about the process and things that you found out and things that swayed you one way or the other?
Sure. Well, to me, I help on the legal due diligence side, and I've been on a few teams with Nick and a few teams with David both, so it's been great. A lot of times we get in there and we find that the IP is not what they say, or they don't have proper license ownership of the IP, which to me as legal is the biggest red flag you can have. So there was one year we had one team where the main IP was a license from a university, and it was not even an exclusive license. So that to me was just done, game over, done, right? How can you be investing in a company that doesn't even have an exclusive license to their main IP? There's other times where the IP is so convoluted, you can't, you know, follow the chain of title. You know, or there's one thing that really drives us nuts and AngelCon, and it's happened a few times, is the companies will not show us certain documents. They won't show us their contracts or things, or their trade. They don't want to talk about things, and they say they want us to sign special NDAs and this and that, and no VC that they're going to go to is going to sign an NDA, and that's just a non-starter as well. So those are the types of things.
Is that whenever there's a little bit of lack of transparency, that puts you on edge right away,
does.
right?
Like,
Yeah,
why
yeah.
are they not
What are
being
they hiding?
transparent? What
Yeah.
are they hiding? And so that is a real concern there. If their corporate documents are messy, you know, we can overcome that. Those can be fixed. It's not a deal breaker there, but it's really, you know, looking under the hood at the IP, making sure that they properly own it or exclusively license it. And, you know, they're being transparent with us. And those are the things that are most helpful. And I mean, AngelCon, we dig in, like we really, really dig into the startups. I would say probably more than a lot of angel groups.
Yeah, and that's part of the training, right? Because we're training. I mean, the goal of AngelCon at the original goal at the start is to train investors to make the right decisions.
Especially for this dollar.
Yeah.
And some small funds might not even do this amount of due diligence. So we're really looking under the hood and getting a feel for what's happening. We've been on customer visits, calling customers, going to sites, all those kinds of things. So it's a real process. And I think that, I hope that the teams also learn, you know, when they go further and get much, much larger checks with more zeros, that understand what kind of diligence they're gonna get through and learn to, properly store contracts, properly protect IP, make sure everyone's signing proper agreements when they hire folks or things, interns. Penny and I have dealt with some interns issues lately. But it's an interesting process. Yeah. So I don't know if we want to.
Yeah, do you, Nick, David, do you want to add to that?
Well, just, put in a plug for the book about Theranos Bad Blood, which I don't know if you, it's
Yeah,
a fascinating read.
Yeah.
And does also show kind of the difficulty in due diligence, because, while a lot of people didn't do any due diligence, and just went by the fact that they had a strong advisory board and
Yeah.
greed, but a lot of people tried to do due diligence, and it's amazing how hard it is. But I think the point you mentioned about just kind of transparency was a very clear red flag that they weren't transparent, and I feel like we've seen, and so I think for people who have startups, really, I think those people who are successful, they have qualities like people describe them as being like coachable or able to receive feedback, and so. This idea about whether or not you can receive feedback, well, you have to be open with people about what you have. And so I think this is always like a very good red flag. The group, the people that I have seen, or the founders that I think have won over the years, have invariably been really open. And just being open isn't enough in and of itself, but those that aren't, I can think of one that we did together, and a group that requires like an NDA and just like requires these frictions, and you think like, that's just an immediate sign that they're probably maybe going to be less coachable, maybe less open to feedback, like all these things that are just risk factors, short of like outright fraud, but might be predictors of other problems as well.
And some of it could be inexperience too, right? It's not necessarily they're trying to hide something, they just don't understand and know that you have to trust these investors, and share what you're doing so that they can, help you to succeed. But that goes to the coachability factor, right? And if they're not willing to take your advice, like this NDA is not going to happen, and then come back later and not worry about an NDA, which has happened, then there is coachability there. So.
I think that's right. Like, basically when we're trained to be like very concerned about, well, I have this, you're trained to need to protect what is yours, and competition. And so there's all this stuff that these are like natural reactions.
Exactly.
But the people who are good will like learn that, oh no, I have to find these people I can trust. And at this early stage of my little thing, these are people who they like want to like you, and you have to then, kind of, build that relationship up.
Yeah.
So one of the first things that gets prioritized, or at least in the teams I was on, in large part because it's both important and might be time consuming to get scheduled, is test out the traction that might come out, right? So the traction might be, say, if it's something that's gotten a government grant, is there somebody who was part of that analysis and awarded that, be willing to talk to the due diligence teams? It's kind of about a 50-50 chance on it. Another investor, or even better if it's a venture capital firm that would be willing to be interviewed. Fine, they don't typically share anything written, but would they be willing to be interviewed because they've done some diligence, and that's a form of traction that startup might have. And then of course, nothing seems better than a customer, right? Even to an unpaid pilot. And in that interview, if it's a painkiller scenario, then I want to hear about their pain, and then have them tell me about why they think this is going to be a fit, or if you will, the painkiller for their pain, and test how they think they would be willing to, or at least how they would be willing to pay for it, because it's an important aspect of testing the customer or market fit, right? If they're used to buying something as a service, and you're trying to sell them a piece of hardware, or vice versa, those things need to be rationalized. This is something they really want to transition to or not.
Yeah.
Like
And that's super important. I don't know that startups realize, when they're getting those first investments, it's like, I'm going to call that other investor, and, if you don't have a good relationship with them, that's going to come out and it's going to become a red flag. Yeah. No, that's great. So let's talk about the winners this year. You awarded $165,000 to Nextera, and let's see, and $50,000 to Ments. So why Nextera? Let's talk about the winner. And the winner is right here in the audience for those who are online, Penny and her team member. But so yeah, let's sing the praises.
I have to kick that one off because I can pick up on the painkiller.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
So when you interview somebody who's talking about their recycling center burning down repeatedly, or at least in danger of burning down repeatedly, and interested in a solution that keeps, in Nextera's case, the batteries that started those fires from even getting into the garbage truck to begin with, or recycling truck to begin with, that's a pretty compelling thing to hear that get told back to you. And it didn't hurt that he also added that just when it comes to pricing, it's all cost plus. So as a ratepayer, I don't like to hear that, but as an investor, that's not bad.
Yeah. So you talked to, so let's take a step back. Nextera, who wants to give Penny, do you want to give your elevator pitch? Your 30-second, explain to everyone here, what does Nextera do?
Awesome. Well, yes, my name is Penny Lane Case, CEO and co-founder. This is Kylie Landenberger, CPO and co-founder. And then we have Stephanie James, who's our CTO and co-founder. So fully women-owned and founded. And we are revolutionizing radar technology with artificial intelligence. So we attach our technology to the sides of recycling vehicles currently, and we detect lithium-ion batteries within curbside bins before they've ever been collected. So this allows them to completely mitigate the risk of these truck and facility fires by leaving the bin at the curb, since it's illegal to dispose of any batteries in your curbside bins in California.
Thank you. And so talking to one of the waste management companies and their issue in dealing with fires on a very regular basis, David, you were able to find out that it's definitely a painkiller, a huge pain. Yeah. So that was number one.
And I mentioned the cost plus.
Yeah.
That's funny, but really, I personally also think that there may become a day, you've heard me say this, where the insurance companies are going to beat them with a huge stick if they don't implement.
Yeah.
More and more remedies or interventions to keep that from happening.
Yeah. Any on Nextera, any other compelling factors that?
I mean, I feel like they, Donna talked about being like mission driven earlier. I mean, I feel like they're very, kind of had very clear mission driven. They're very able to articulate like a very clear problem that they're solving. So I feel like, all those things that we talked about, they check that box really well. And so that's, I think what got them early on, but then, kind of, the follow-up from the detailed due diligence that was done, just kind of further supported all of those things and, kind of gave them incremental advantages relative to other people where you might see like certain red flags pop up, et cetera. But so then you start to see this, kind of widening gulf, is kind of my impression of it.
So I work with the team. I'm their lawyer. But I also think that, when we were looking at some of the founders and the founders team, Penny Lane is a very passionate, driven, focused, organized leader. And that definitely came across in just the way the diligence, was handled and how she pitched. And I think this year, the group of 6 were very early stage. So a lot of times we have a mix of some people that are a little bit later and some people are very early. And so this year, since everyone was relatively early, how the founders came across was definitely a deciding factor. And I think that spoke to Penny and the team and how they came across as well. And so that was a big part of the decisions and what I felt as well.
Great. And so let's talk about Ments, the second startup that we awarded, that the group awarded funding to. What were the drivers there with Ments?
From my impression, I mean, similar. It was very passionate founder who's looking to solve, kind of a very pressing problem. And I guess her background meant, is developing a product to kind of basically, I guess, help with menstruation and
Right. To
I mean,
replace the use of common feminine hygiene products, pads, tampons. And this is a silicone cup with an applicator to facilitate inserting and removing. There's a device, a part of the device that facilitates the removal of the cup too. Yeah.
Yeah, so in the due diligence process, they talked about, kind of the pain points or, kind of poor experiences that women had, and they had a lot of customer data, to David's point, about interviews with people, problems. And so I think one of the things where they, kind of showed really well was that they understood their customer and that they had, trying to solve a very clear problem. Donica mentioned that they're very early stage, and so there's probably going to need to be, I'm imagining over this, there'll be a long journey with various pivots and various evolution, but the founders seem very strong, very clear problem, and it seems like they understand their customer very well. So there's like, I think a lot of people saw potential in what they're doing.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I also work with men's. So, and McCall, she's doing stuff with the NSF and various grants, and the non-dilutive funding is also appealing as an investor as well. And I think we saw the potential there for the future of her and her product and potential pivots along the way. And she's already made pivots.
Right. I was going to
She's
mention that
already been
she
doing this
yeah.
and her work in this area, in
Mhm.
this specific field. And she sort of found the painkiller, so to speak. And it is a real problem for women. And so I think we saw the potential there. And,
Yeah.
and she's a bit earlier though, but we did see the potential.
It did seem like there was no competition really trying to solve it the way, anywhere near the way she was, that we could tell. And, I'm not gonna remember the details right off the top of my head, but I seem to recall one or two notable acquirers in her space, so that
Definitely.
liquidity
Oh,
looked
yes.
interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, potential, so,
Yeah. And that's
in
great.
addition to everything.
Yeah. So I do want to open it up. Are there any questions from our audience? Does anyone want to jump in? Mike, yes. Yeah, let's try this at you.
Got it. So you've spoken a lot about the amount of time you've spent doing due diligence, meeting with the founders, hearing their initial pitches to get to the 6 that presented AngelCon. But ultimately, as an angel, you're looking to get a return in your investment. So what are you looking to get out of your investments? Because it's not just all for fun and helping the community and helping local startups. You're ultimately looking to get a return on the investment.
Thank you.
How do you find success?
You're the
Oh,
fun
boy.
manager.
It's on you, David.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, there's, I think, a lot of evidence out there that, as far as defining success, if you will, that funds, if they return a 28 to 30% IRR, would consider themselves very successful. In terms of a multiple per startup, I don't know what that exactly would translate to when you're only doing 2 investments. But if you're doing 20 to 25, then you really only need an average of about 2.5 to 3x to achieve that, at least in a 5-year period anyway, to achieve that IRR. Just to give some numbers off the top of my head here.
Yeah, I mean,
Tell me
to me, a 2x would be great. I mean, it's a low barrier to entry. AngelCon, it's not like a traditional venture fund. And if we could get 3x, fantastic. But it's better than my money sitting in a savings account. And that's part of why I do it. It's not for a significant return. But 2 to 3x would be great.
And we have, I know some investors in the fund, I'm thinking about Bert Forbes. I just want to give him a shout out because he's the best. I think he must be close to 80 years old, but he's participated in every single fund, all 7. And for him, it's just, he has such a philanthropic take. And that's the other extreme of the spectrum, right? He just wants to support young entrepreneurs and give them that hope of being on the right path to solving these big problems.
And I mean, I think that we haven't had any exits in any of the funds yet, so we don't have data to show what the multiples might be.
That's a good point. And so, and then the average is 7 years to start seeing a return. So unfortunately, the very first startup we invested, so we've only ever lost one, and it was the very first one that we invested in. All the other top 6s of the years are still, alive. So, and it does take about 7 years to see a result on average. Yeah. So, what's next on your angel investment path? Like how does this, you're still involved with Element 8? Do you want to keep going with AngelCon? Do you see yourself participating in other angel groups? What's for each of you personally, what's your angel investment path looking like moving forward?
Whoa, I mean,
I didn't mean to put you on the spot. You don't have to.
I plan to do AngelCon in the future. I feel like it's always a great opportunity to meet local startups that are doing interesting things and to meet other interesting people. And so I feel like I will do that in the future. And beyond that, I feel like I have no definitive plans, and it's like a serendipitous walk, and we'll just see what comes along.
Yeah.
I plan to continue along the AngelCon path. I always enjoy being part of it. And I'm also involved in an LP in Central Coast Ventures as well. And then I just look for opportunities as they arise if I'm interested in. I have invested in some of my clients along the way as I've seen opportunities arise. So that's always fun to do as well.
That's great. So just staying very locally involved, and that's awesome.
Yeah, very similar.
Yeah.
I certainly will be back. I am, maybe now that I've gone far enough into my journey that I might try to fit in more time, coaching.
Oh.
When you go to talk to investors, when you go into due diligence with investors, here's what we're going to test, right? And be prepared.
That's awesome. Yeah. Well, any startup would be very lucky to have you on their team advising them in that regard. And I actually want to take this opportunity to thank each and every one of you for the ongoing support and mentoring, and not only through AngelCon, but I know each and every one of you does a lot outside of that as well. So thank you. But open for more questions from our audience if anyone wants to. Yes. So I'm just going to give you the mic. Yeah.
Thank you. I probably have mentored over 100 startups in my career. The problem I always face is I don't have domain expertise. My guess is you didn't have domain expertise in radar, waste, recycling. How do you handle that?
One of the nice things about AngelCon is we might have somebody that has domain expertise in different categories, and Judy and Liz and the team try to align on the due diligence team people that have the business and domain expertise with certain teams. Like if there's a medical device specialist, they might put them with the med device company, and on the DD teams. I don't know that we did have anybody with radar, but the thing is important is, like David explained, we talked to the customer or the beta testing customer, potential customer. And so that's kind of how we got to the conclusion that this is definitely a painkiller, as David, now I'm going to use that term all the time.
No, it's sticking.
So that's how we do it in AngelCon, is we try to find and rely on people that have different expertise in different areas
Yeah.
and match them with the teams accordingly.
Yeah, similar, I'd say, try to build up a network where you know somebody. Or somebody who knows somebody, a couple of degrees separation, who might have some expertise that you would need to help complement that. But I still say 80–90% of it is really about being ready as a startup to go pitch investors. And where I think the domain expertise comes in, most important is looking at where the torpedoes, if you'll pardon the analogy, might be, right? Maybe IP torpedoes being a technical hurdle that they just haven't figured out yet. That's where maybe the domain expertise comes in most handy.
Yeah. Any other yes?
Hi, hello. Thank you for all the info today. And I see a lot of tech come through, obviously AngelCon and everything else, and it's awesome to watch. We're technically a consumer goods company, so I'm just wondering if you have any advice, especially from a legal standpoint, of things that I need to think about or look out for when I'm looking for investing, that would be important for consumer goods.
What type of consumer goods?
We're a non-alcoholic hemp-infused spirit alternative, so it's a CBD product while also being a non-alcoholic spirit alternative.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Yeah, so do you have food and beverage consultants?
We do.
Yeah.
We do have a couple of consultants who you might already be working with. Yes, he's one of our
Yeah.
consultants. So we do, I mean, you're right. It's a more arduous path. There are some groups that specialize in CPG, consumer packaged goods. Because there are trends and there is food tech. Like, so what you're doing sounds a little bit like food tech. It's different. It's a new product line. And there's a trend supporting it. So I mean, I guess what I'm getting to is finding the right not wasting your time with investors that
Yeah.
may not
exactly.
have an interest in that industry. And there are groups who do, but you have to find the right
Yeah.
one. Yeah.
And I mean, yes, there's a lot of tech that pitch AngelCon, but you could certainly pitch. I think we had the kombucha company pitch.
We
a
may,
few years
yes,
back,
yeah.
The local kombucha committee, but yeah, finding the investors that focus on CPG and specifically in beverage, food and beverage, that will be, distilling your list down to target those investors versus traditional tech-based or med device or whatever it is, venture funds, will be key because, CPG and your niche, it's going to be harder. Like, I work with Haley Pavoni, my passion, and you could talk to her because she's had quite the path and it's been very difficult. And they're finally,
Taking off,
they're
yeah,
just
yeah.
amazingly doing so well, finally. But it's been hard for her to get traditional investment. And so just, I think food and beverage is a different animal than shoes. And there's a lot of investment, I think, going on more so in food and beverage lines. right now.
A potential hack would be to find some startups that did get funded that are similar-ish and go find out who funded them.
Yeah.
That's a
Yeah.
good place to go,
That's
start
great
asking
advice.
them,
Yeah.
Poking.
And,
people
you
and find
also
introduction.
might
Yeah.
have the wellness aspect of the CBD, right?
Mhm.
So that's very on trend. But if you go to Crunchbase, you can get a lot of information there. You can sign up for the pro version trial for a couple of weeks for free.
Exactly.
To find the right investors, yeah.
Yeah.
And for AngelCon, yes, there's a focus on tech, but the reason for that, and the real reason is, as investors, we're looking for startups that have the potential to be scalable and high growth. So as a CPG company, if there's a potential to be scalable and high growth, that works great. That can totally be a good fit. It just, you have to have that. For example, the investors aren't going to invest in a local coffee shop or something more Main Street. Yeah. But thank you all so much for being here this morning. We will have a full recording of Coffee and Conversation. It'll be shared to everyone who registered.